So let's dive in and talk about men, because I think both of us, we've got a heart for men, and to see men just excel and thrive in their role as a man and as a husband and as a businessman, and we're all dealing with a lot of issues.
I think the core issue is we don't talk. Like, men don't talk. We think we need to carry everything, and I think that men in general, a large majority of men are weighed down by their problems because they don't talk about them. And then the second thing is, I don't think men really know what it is to be a man.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's a culture thing, I think. It's a culture problem, and especially in the Afrikaans culture.
And speaking about struggles, one of your toughest or struggles that you've had, and just, how you worked through it. And
probably one of my biggest struggles, and it might sound silly, is that I struggled with gaming addiction for a long time. But I think the thing that was probably my biggest struggle was losing my job a couple of years ago.
Hi guys, I'm really excited for this new episode of Men's Wealth, the podcast, the Heart of Man podcast. And today we've got the honor of having Adriaan Venner Scheepers with us. So Adriaan, welcome. Adriaan is a husband, father of three, businessman, and he's also got his own podcast show called Die Huntsman, also a clothing brand. So Adriaan, maybe as a start, give us background about The Huntsman, where it started, what's your vision with The Huntsman?
So where it started, first of all, hi, thank you for having me. But where it started was actually as the sole focus, as you mentioned, a clothing brand. And my partner and I had a discussion a couple months in, and it was actually picking up. But we had a discussion a couple months in that I wanted to start a podcast to promote the brand. And just something happened that neither of us foresee happening, is that the podcast quickly became the main focus of the brand, and basically went from a vehicle or a tool to promote the brand to you changing into this ministry that Huntsman has become. So now the brand is actually a secondary function for Huntsman, and the podcast, and we've got men's gatherings and stuff. That's the primary function, and it's we just a month ago or so decided to just make it a fully fledged ministry now. So it's called Huntsman Bediening now.
Awesome.
Huntsman Ministries, and we still do the merch, like caps that you see here, and we've got shirts and tops and hoodies and whatever, but that's not the focus anymore. That's just to raise money for the ministry.
Okay.
Yeah.
And the name The Huntsman, where does that come from?
Yeah, so my second name, Venner. First of all, when I started the company, it was a media company. That was gonna be the function of it being a media company, because I used to work for the Blue Bulls. Rugby union was started there in 2010, and in 2014 I realized that the union side of the company or the brand has no media presence. So I went to the CEO, told him, listen, let's start a media. I'll do it. I'll learn, I'll go for courses, whatever we need to do. So I started teaching myself media, and they paid for some courses and stuff for me to uplift the union side of things on the media end. And then in 2017 I started Huntsman Media. So I did some research. I originally was going to call it Venner Media. And it just didn't, I don't know, it just didn't sound that cool to me. So I did some research on the name Venner, on the surname, which has been in my family for a while, the name Venner. And it turns out way back in the Old English times, a Venner was a huntsman, the guy that would go out and hunt and make sure, take the king on hunts, make sure the area is safe where they're going to hunt, and make sure they are wild animals that they can hunt. And so there's also another function of a huntsman, that he is the guy that back then they had villages. It's not like today where we have towns and cities and stuff, they had villages. So the huntsman would be the guy that provides for the village. He would go out and hunt, but more than that, he would make sure, again, the premises or the surrounding area of the village is safe. He would know where the drop-offs are, or the thorny bushes, or like anything that could be harmful to the villagers. He would know about it. That was his job. So it just spoke to me about what the function of a man should actually be.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
So let's dive in and talk about men, because I think both of us, we've got a heart for men, and to see men just excel and thrive in their role as a man and as a husband and as a businessman, and we're all dealing with a lot of issues. And I think on your show as well, I've watched some of your podcasts, that men struggle with stuff, and there's different reasons why different men struggle with things. But what are some of the common things that you see in your show that men share when they share their hearts? What are some of the common things that they struggle with?
So I would say the basis of us starting the podcast was actually a friend and I going for a coffee. Like, we had a weekly coffee meeting, and we would just talk bluntly, honestly and openly about our struggles, our issues, what we're going through, what the Lord is working with us in our lives at that stage. And one day I just got this, I'd say it's the Holy Spirit that just gave me this idea of like, these conversations are the conversations that people need to hear. Because that's the conversations that men don't have. Even with our wives, we struggle to be genuine and truly open. But with our friends, it's a little bit easier, because I don't think we tend, and I don't necessarily know why, but my theory is we tend to think that our wives would judge us and our friends wouldn't, and that's why we go to our friends with these kind of things. So I think the core issue is we don't talk. Like, men don't talk. We think we need to carry everything, and I think that men in general, large majority of men are weighed down by their problems because they don't talk about them. And talking doesn't necessarily, sort out the issue, but it helps. The Bible says, like good soldiers of Christ, share your burdens with one another. But it also says that we need to carry our own burdens, but we need to offload. So, I think that's one of the core issues. And then the second thing is, I don't think men really know what it is to be a man.
Yeah.
It's a culture thing, I think. It's a culture problem, and especially in the Afrikaans culture.
Sure. And speaking about struggles, just in your personal life, share a struggle that you've had, one of your toughest or struggles that you've had, and just, how you worked through it, and,
I've had many. I've had many. Probably one of my biggest struggles, and it might sound silly to many people, is that I struggled with gaming addiction for a long time, and I still do it often, not often, every now and then, but I won't say it's an issue anymore. But I did struggle with that for many years, since 2005, to be honest. But I think the thing that was probably my biggest struggle was losing my job a couple of years ago. I had a very good, I was employed by an American company, and I had a good salary, good income, lovely job because it's remote. You work for Americans, and you've got a lot of free time. So I got despondent, I think, and I got comfortable. And I didn't know it at that stage, but basically what happened, the company sank because of the banking collapse in California 2 years ago. I think it was in 2023, where Silicon Valley Bank collapsed, and a lot of banks. I think it was 4 or 5 banks that collapsed. And one of those banks were actually our biggest contributor. the company's biggest contributor, and the company just sank. So it was like cold turkey, just like January 2023. The CEO just phoned me and told me, listen, we can't pay you anymore. We're working on it, so you're not unemployed, but we can't pay you this month. And I was like, okay. Well, held on for a couple of months, dove into my savings, and with the hope that they would find their feet. And in May 2023, that's when I started the podcast as well. They let me know, yeah, sorry, they just sent me a termination letter.
Sure.
And and then I was in deep trouble because I used all my savings. I had no income, and so that was probably the hardest thing I had to go through.
Sure.
It caused a lot of problems with me, my family, my wife, my marriage. So I would say that's the hardest thing I had to go through in my life, amongst others.
Yeah, and if we can delve into that, so obviously you had a relationship with the Lord at that stage. Yeah. And I think for a lot of men, it's tough going through these things because we tend to think that, having a relationship with the Lord and being a Christian, life shouldn't be this tough. Yeah. But then we face this tough things. Yeah. So just talk us through your emotions and your relationship with the Lord during that time. Because I've also had tough times in the past, and I really, if I look back, if I didn't have the relationship with the Lord, I think I would have been in huge trouble personally and just relationally. So just talk us through, how did you experience your relationship with the Lord during, let's call it during that time that you lost your job and your income?
Sure, Johan. It's tough summing up 2 years in one answer, but obviously there was a lot of pain, a lot of crying, a lot of uncertainty, a lot of shouting, angry. I got angry with God, like why? But He was always there and always faithful, and I still question Him. I had an episode yesterday. I was like, why, Lord? So like, how long does this have to go on? But the thing is, putting that aside, the struggles, I would say what I learned in these last 2 years is so much more valuable than the pain that I went through. And I think there's so much beauty in suffering for God. And it's not suffering in the sense like the disciples necessarily suffered, horrible deaths for the cause and for the kingdom. But I just drove. When I drove here this morning, I drove past a woman. I don't want to get too close to home, but I drove past a woman who's battling cancer, and I just thought, like, man, you're crying about money, and that woman is struggling with cancer, and she's jogging, and she's out on the road having a jog, and I'm on my way to a podcast, and I'm worried about money and finances, and yet it's been 24 months. It's 24 months last month, and I'm still here. I have food, I have clothes, and I still question God, but He still provides every day. Yes, there's a lot of struggles that come with it. It's not easy, and I think that's something that you touched on, like that I want to dive into a bit, if we can. Like, once you give your heart to God, once you commit your life to God, everything isn't Månsken in Rosa. Everything isn't like, okay, great. Jesus warns us in in John 16 verse 33, He says, troubles will come. He doesn't say if troubles come, or maybe troubles will come. He says troubles will come. And He says, but be courageous, for I overcame the world. And that's awesome, man. That's gets me emotional, because He already walked this. He did it everything, and He did it in a condensed period of basically 3 years, where He had to go through all that pain and hardship and suffering and torture and stuff. And He just knew, what his purpose was. And I think that that's what you were also saying. Just to add on to that, if we know what the purpose is, it makes the suffering bearable. And the purpose isn't me. The purpose is the kingdom. That's what it's about.
Sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, and the thing, that I always hold on to is the fact that, there's always hope when you've got this relationship with the Lord. There's always hope, and there's always something that you look forward to, that can take you beyond the struggles. And, it's just amazing. I sometimes I can't see how men especially, ladies as well, but because we're obviously talking to men on this podcast, men especially struggling with stuff and turning their back on the Lord, because they believe there's something else for them. And there isn't really something else for them. The other things are all always going down a slippery slope. Let's come back to I just want to go back to the addiction, the gaming addiction, because I think that's a very relevant thing nowadays, that people don't realize that they've got a problem. Yeah. So how did you come to a point, let's say, for instance, if you've got an alcohol addiction or any other drug addiction, it's out there, people see it, people will approach you, people will maybe confront you, your loved ones, that you've got an issue. But on the gaming side, it might be, it's like a porn addiction, it's behind closed walls, no one really sees it, and closed doors. So how did you come to the realization that your gaming is an addiction and that's an issue?
So I would say there wasn't a precise moment. I would say that I always knew it was wrong, and it's a problem. But we get to a point, and that's with any addiction, where you get to a point where you've justified your actions, and that's when it's really dangerous, because then it's like you said, you don't realize it's a problem anymore. But thank God I had the Holy Spirit to convict me. But it did cause problems. It did cause problems in my marriage. It caused relationship issues, caused work issues. So it was just a vicious cycle. And it's the same with any addiction. On my show, I've had probably 90% of my guests struggled with some or other addiction. And many of them have a concise, a clear moment where they get this epiphany and something happens and they know, okay, now it's time to change. But some people need more than one time. Some people need 3 or 4 or 5 times, Some people need a daily reminder. And I was at that point where I was feeling so displeased with myself. Because of my struggles with a game, man, it's so ridiculous. Now, when I speak about it, I just feel like it's so ridiculous. But again, that was my struggle, and it was real for me, and it started impacting a lot of things around me. But I think it's in Jeremiah where God says, "You will no longer be under the law, but the law will be written on your hearts." And my belief is that everyone knows what the problem is in their lives. But they lie to themselves, and they lie to God, and they try and justify that thing. And I think that's the first show that you have a problem. As soon as you try and justify that thing, it's a problem. It's a problem. It's idolatry.
Try and lie to yourself.
Yeah.
It's actually funny if you look back at it, but it's a real thing. With the things I've struggled with before as well, you start to justify yourself and justify your actions, and again, you're not moving forward in life through doing that. And while you were speaking now, I was just thinking of the importance of community and accountability, especially for men. Because I know, men don't talk. And men try and fight these battles on their own. And one of the things that men do, and I myself have done it in the past, is that you isolate yourself. because you feel ashamed, because you've got friends and people around you, and you might feel ashamed to share, this addictions and the struggles that you're going through. So, just working through the struggles that you've had by losing your job and the addiction, the gaming addiction. Did a community of other men or any accountability partners or other relationships help you at all by getting through this?
Yeah, definitely. My church played a big role. I had two or three friends that really stood close by me during this time, and I had a lot of coffees with the friends, and I'm grateful to them because they took in a lot of garbage during these last 2 years. And I'd love to say my wife, but I shut her out completely. And that's something that God has been speaking to me throughout the last couple of weeks. It came up in one of my conversations with a guy that he said, there's no amount of success. What's the exact saying? I'm just thinking about it. It doesn't matter how successful you are in your business or in your ministry or whatever if your relationship at home is broken. And that hit me very hard because I am in a place where I know I need restoration in my marriage. We're still together and she's been there and she loves me and I love her. But there's been a lot of damage there. And my ministry doesn't mean anything if I can't even clean my own room, I think Jordan Peterson says it. He says in his book, 10, can't even remember the title, but he says, every one of us wants to go out and change the world, but we can't even make our beds. And it's like, okay. So God is actually talking to me about that now. And I'm sorry, I know it's I'm pivoting the question a bit more to marriage, but I think it's again, it comes to the shame thing, where you're exactly right. We hide the stuff that we struggle with because of shame, and we sometimes feel like that's the biggest reason I couldn't include my wife, because I wanted to still seem strong and still seem capable, and what I was actually doing is causing more harm and causing her to lose respect for me, because I'm not talking to her and she doesn't know what's going on, and I'm trying to fix it on my own, and she has to do this and that, and so that's something that I'm really working on, and that God has been speaking to me about, and just being present in that and fixing my home first. I can't do it, I can't fix my home. That's the first realization. He has to come in, but I need to be open to that. I don't know if that answers your question, but
No, it definitely does, Adriaan. And you mentioned something there now, being present. And I know we've discussed it before as well. It actually frustrates me nowadays. If you speak to anyone, if you ask them how's it going, and they'll tell you, yeah, it's going very busy. So we're all busy. I think we should just make peace of it, and I don't think it's ever going to change. But we need to adjust, regarding values, priorities, etc., and then being present. So another thing you mentioned now, just your relationship with your wife, and equally important, I think, is your relationship with your kids.
yeah,
Because we as men, we've got a household that we need to look after, and it doesn't really matter if you make how much money, if you however successful according to worldly terms, but I've got the strong conviction, which I really believe it's a biblical conviction, that, as you said, is that your first priority is your wife and your kids. And one of the things that men struggle with is being present. Because of all these things happening. You've got pressure at work, there's financial pressure, there's relational pressure, you've got kids, you've got your wife, and you've got all of these different voices. But how do you, just from a practical point of view, and I know it's something that you're also going through now, but practically, a practical tip on being present. Is there anything that you can share to help men just being present? I mean, if you've got an hour a day with your wife, you don't want to spend 50 minutes thinking about your meetings tomorrow. You want to be there for her that hour. Same with your kids. And how do you do that?
That's a difficult one because, like I said, I just recently saw the damage that has been done to my marriage.
Now, I want to stop you there. I think that's also one of the things. You realize it, you see it, and then you realize you need to start being present. Exactly. And then you make a plan.
Exactly. And God He is incredibly faithful.
Yeah.
Because I met this guy, Leander Opperman, and he was on my show. But he challenged me in so many ways. And so God sent this guy on my path without me lifting a finger. You know, he was suggested by a friend, and he was put in touch with me through a friend, and so I didn't do anything. I didn't discover this guy. So I'm not saying, you know, he's my Messiah, but I'm saying God sent this guy with the wisdom to help me realize that there's a hole in the most important part of a man's life, and which is his marriage. You know, if your marriage is falling apart, and that's the thing, we often tend to go out and like I said with Jordan Peterson, try and fix the world, but you know, we are broken. And we tend to forget that we need healing as well, we need restoration as well, we need fulfilling as well. I'm not saying that you have to wait for the perfect moment before you go out, you know, but I'm just saying God is faithful in revealing these things to us. And He sent me this guy that gave me so much wisdom on challenging me in bettering my marriage. And he gave me a couple of pointers. So I'm going to paraphrase him because I don't have the answer. That's the real answer, is I don't know how. But he gave me some tips that I'm trying to implement, which is, I think, making a difference. So the first thing is, he said, when I met him, I tried to phone him because the first time we met, we were on our way to a mutual spot, a coffee shop. And I tried to phone him on the way in my car just to find out, like, what does he drink? What's he drinking? What is he having? So I can order if I'm there before him. And it's kind of what I always do. And he didn't answer his phone, so I just ordered him a cappuccino, for instance. And when he got there, I told him, listen, sorry, I just ordered you a cappuccino. I tried to phone you. And he said, no, I don't answer my phone in the car. I don't text in the car. I put my phone in the back passenger door because I know if it's in arm's reach, I'll pick it up. And then it's like, that was weird to me. When he said that, I was like, it's strange, man. You know, it's kind of, I do a lot of admin on the road. But anyway, then when he came on my show, he said something that really impacted his marriage positively was committing to time with your wife, daily time, like do a morning walk with her or do an evening walk with her, no matter what it's like. You know, no matter what the circumstances are like, no matter how busy you guys are, you have to make time for each other. Even if it's a short walk with your dogs or your kids or whatever, a bike ride or whatever. But do that, and then you do a dedicated date night at least 3 times a month. And then he said, which is the coolest thing to me, and that's something that I'm still battling with, is pray with your wife every day. I was like, dude, that's hard. Yeah. That's moeilik, nee? And because he says, why is we are the most vulnerable when we pray. And your wife needs to see you at your most vulnerable. And she needs to see your heart. And I want to tear up because it's so beautiful to me, you know. we can be vulnerable before God, but your wife needs to see that vulnerability, and that comes to the thing that I said in the last my last rant was I shut my wife out because I'm afraid of her seeing me for what I really am. I'm afraid of her seeing me as a weak man. And I often get the notion, just walking in the street, I get the notion like the devil whispers in my ear. Like, I wonder when people will see the real Adriaan. You know, like, when will you be exposed? And I think men are so afraid of being exposed.
Yeah.
But if we expose ourselves, then there's nothing to fear.
And then it's actually okay.
Exactly.
We're so afraid of that, but when you actually expose yourself, you realize there's actually a big community of men going through the same stuff.
Exactly.
And then we can support each other.
Exactly.
Yeah, that's good. Good advice, especially that praying with your wife part. I think that's an amazing thing, because, like you say, that's where you share your heart and you share your heart with the Lord, and that's where you're just honest and net raw.
Yeah.
And whoop.
Yes.
Adriaan, and let's move on to something else, a different discussion, and it's also something that I want to ask you is just your relationship with your dad. Tell me about it. How was your relationship with your dad, and how is it today? And what impact does it have? And the reason for my question also for guys listening is that, I mean, we need to realize as dads now the impact that a dad has on his children's lives.
Yeah.
So whether it's good or bad, I mean, we all have had different experiences, but tell us about your experience with your dad.
So I actually had a good relationship with my father. He was a good guy, loving, and everybody loved him. You know, I think I always make the joke that my friends came to visit me because of my dad, not because of me. You know, they wanted to spend time with my father rather than me. But he was such a lekker okay. He was not a nice guy, and everybody just enjoyed him. But I want to say something. First of all, the one thing that I'm super grateful for my father is that no matter what, he always took me to church, you know, and that's something that I'll always be grateful. It doesn't matter if I got home 4 a.m. in the morning from Hatfield, poep dronk, sorry for my Afrikaans, but that's the reality. That was the case, you know. That was me before the Lord saved me. Hy het vir my gesê, geen nie om of jy soos 'n stroois ryk nie, jy gaan kerk toe. Verstaan? So I had to say that in Afrikaans because you know, that was his words, verbatim. As long as you live under my roof, you're going to church every Sunday, you know. So I'm grateful for him for that. But I remember this one, and he was always at my rugby games. You know, he never missed anything. But what I would say is that I wish my dad spent more time with me. Like more time away from rugby, away from sport, away from the TV, you know. Like we had this one time that I still remember. Him and my mom actually had an argument. We were in Belito on holiday, and him and my mom had an argument. And so the dynamic was, it was always the entire clean family, die skoonfamilie, wat noem jy dit, die in-laws, the in-laws, clean family. It was always the in-laws. So my mother's entire family, because it was her father bought the place in Belito, so it's been in the family for years. And so and then it was my dad, you know, with all the in-laws. So there were always arguments on holidays. I'm laughing about it because it was never a big deal. It was like normal stuff, you know. And my brother and I were down at the beach, and we saw our dad coming down from the flat, from the top. We had this amazing place on the main beach, Compensation Beach Road in Belito. It was awesome. And we saw him, and we obviously ran to him. I was like probably around 8 years old. My brother was around 12 or 13. And he was just on a mission, like hierdie ou se bloed kook, And we asked him, like, where are you going? And he's like, no, I'm just going for a walk. And my brother and I, naturally, we asked, like, can we come with you? And he's like, yes. So we walked from Main Beach, Belito, all the way to what we call the Blue Lagoon. It's like 20 k's. It's up right up until the point where you enter Zimbabwe. Dis 'n entjie, It's
Not as far.
yeah. But we saw the coolest stuff, we saw dead fish and sculpies and, it was just time with my dad. Dit was die awesomeste ding in my lewe. Net 4 ure op die strand saam met my pa, right? And I wish I had that more, So what I would say is just spend time with your kids. Not around something that's mutual, like a rugby game or cricket practice or whatever. Flippin' go
Just
walk with them.
No, just be.
Yeah, go spend intentional time with your kids. I took my boys, one of my friends has a lodge just outside of Pretoria, and he just told me one day, like, if you want to go anytime, just go. The place is empty. We never rent it out anymore, It's just for family use and friends and stuff. And so I took the boys there for a weekend, and we had the most amazing time. And I gave them each a pocket knife, and for the weekend, and I just told them, like, you do everything with this pocket knife. You eat with it. As jy stokkies wil gaan sny, this is your tool for the weekend. So I taught them how to make fire and use their knives, and I told them, like, if it's gone, it's gone. If they lose it, they lose it. I'm not giving them a new one. So they still have their pocket knives, and do stuff like that. Like, make time to spend with your kids. But it's also important with your daughters as well. Like, I've got a daughter and 2 boys, and my daughter is next on the list. I have to do something with her. Yeah,
it's great, these things. We had, with the daughters, we had this dance at school last year, the pa en seun, pa en dogter dance. Yes. And it was also just amazing, to really dress her up and take her out for the evening. It's so special, and it's good times together, because then obviously you get to chat about the other stuff, and get to see what just stirs their hearts.
Just to add on, sorry, Johan, I think for dads to realize the psychological thing and the spiritual thing with your relationship with your kids is boys and girls get their identity from their fathers. They don't get it from their mothers. They get it from their dads. And that's why a broken family is such an impact on society, has such a negative impact on a family. Because if there's no father, there's no identity. Because there's nothing that can replace that identity, then there's nothing that can replace the role of a father. And John Aldrich actually says that he also grew up without his dad. His dad checked out when he was very young, and then became an alcoholic, and then later passed away. And then his grandfather became his father figure. So either they replace that role, another man has to replace that role. But if another man doesn't, it's either God or Satan. That's the only other options. And unfortunately, a lot of people tend to go to the bad side, the dark side.
Oh, absolutely.
So men, it's important. And by all means, I just want to also clarify this. I am not the perfect dad. I make tons of mistakes, and I'm learning on the way. As we said earlier, on the fly, we're learning on the fly. But man, I'm trying. I'm trying to be a good dad. Yeah.
And also to install this identity in your kids and your family, you have to be present. What we discussed, because there's a lot of dads who's at home, but they're never present, so they never actually get to speak to their kids about identity. Because it's one thing, like you say, it's one thing to be at your son or your daughter's sports game or watch TV together or braai together, but you can also actually never connect with them.
Yeah.
So that's the challenge we as men have. And Adriaan, tell me, God, if I speak to you about God, God the Father, what does God mean to you as a man?
One word answer. Everything. Yeah. That's it. Like, I cannot imagine life without him. And I cannot understand how people can do life without him. As dit nie vir hom was nie, was ek nie meer nie. Nou, dit kan ek with an honest heart, I can say that. So he's everything to me. He's my only comfort, man. And that's the thing, just quickly back on the kids, and then I'll come back to God. And I think the reason why God is pointing me towards my marriage is because the way we treat our wives are also the way our children learn identity. And that's why your relationship that's why your marriage is the first priority in any home. Because boys will treat their wives the way you treat your wife, and your woman, your
wife,
your daughter will marry a guy that treats her the way you treat your wife. And God has been pointing me, again, he's my guide, that comes back to him. He's my teacher, he's my father. Recently I got to listen to a podcast by John Aldridge and his co-host Alan. I think the guy's like 78 years old or something. I don't know, I'm speaking under correction, but he's old. And he said God is speaking to him this year about becoming a son again. I was like, and when he said it, it resonated with me, because I feel like I need to come into sonship again and start over. Like, God has to teach me to be a man from scratch
off. Yeah, sure.
So, God, everything.
Awesome.
Yeah.
And lastly, define a man. What is a man? What's a man?
Ek sal vir Matt Walsh moet bel om te hoor. Ja, graag. Wow. Funny thing is, when I started the podcast, we wanted to talk about, manhood, manliness, all that stuff. Basically, it was gonna be a counterculture towards toxic masculinity and all that stuff. There are toxic men, I get that. But there's no such thing as toxic masculinity. Masculinity in itself is a good thing. It cannot be toxic. But we don't know what a man is. We don't know what masculinity is. And so we corrupt masculinity because we don't know what it is and we don't know where the answers are. So I started this podcast with a lot of bravado, lekker braaf, yeah. And like 3 or 4 episodes in, I realized I have no idea what a man is. I have no idea. So I can't give you a clear-cut answer on that, but I'm learning from God because He has the answers, and the answers are in the Bible. And that's all I can point guys to, is just go read your Bible, man. Just go read your Bible. Learn what God says about you. Learn that God delights in you. Nee? Met ons sondes, met ons probleme, with all our baggage, with all our sin, with everything, He delights in you. Because He doesn't see us anymore. As soon as we give our hearts to Jesus and we follow Him and we commit our lives to Him, God sees Jesus. We are covered by His blood. He sees His Son. He doesn't see that broken, sinful man anymore. But He wants to, and that's the awesome thing. And I know it's so cliche, but that thing about God loves you as He finds you, but He loves you enough to change you. Nee? And that's where I am. He's changing me, and He's fathering me, and He's teaching me how to be a man. So when I have the answer, ek sal jou 'n likeie gee, dan sal ek hom weer kom gee, dan sal ek die antwoord kom gee.
Awesome, man.
But the answer is in the Bible.
Awesome. Yeah, and one thing I just want to end off while you were speaking, if I think of a man, I think of someone that protects, someone who protects his family, not physically, spiritually, relationally, protect them from bad stuff entering the home, and protecting my wife, and protecting the relationships, and also not the tough one, who never cries, but also someone who just shows compassion. Teach your kids and your wife how to love, how to love people and how to just be yourself and finding your identity in God.
Yeah.
Adriaan, thank you very much for today, man. I truly appreciate your time and your wisdom, and I truly think that men out there will gain wisdom from the wisdom that you've shared. So all the best of your podcast.
Thank you.
Man, I trust that the Lord will just impact men as we carry on with what the Lord has laid on our life. Thanks for your time, man. Cheers. Cool, man.